Friends, we are trying something new today. Please leave a comment below and tell us what you think. But I know sometimes it's a little weird when you're watching online service and we're talking about checking in your kids. Clearly you don't have to do that. So here's the deal. We're going to have a short announcement, one song prior to that, and we're gonna have a teaching for you. It should take no more than 40 minutes. So yeah, here we go.
Come gather round the mystery of love in our broken history, where grace heals the fault lines in me time and time again, and welcomes me in to a house for the hungry, a well for the thirsty, where all saints come together, shoulder to shoulder, a welcome for the traveler, a new wine for the vineyard. In all things, God is able. Love has a bigger table. Show me who is my neighbor, the Christ hidden in the beggar. 'Cause love doesn't need a stranger, love calls them friend and welcomes them in to a house for the hungry, a well for the thirsty, in all saints come together, shoulder to shoulder, a welcome for the traveler, new wine for the vineyard. In all things, God is able, 'cause love has a bigger table. Waiting next to me, we got some room for each other. Let my enemy be my family, fill my cup till it's running over. There's an empty seat waiting next to me, we gotta make some room for each other. Let my enemy be my family, fill my cup till it's running over. A house for the hungry, a well for the thirsty, where all saints come together, shoulder to shoulder, a welcome to the traveler, a new wine for the vineyard. In all things, God is able, 'cause love has a bigger table. Love has a bigger table. There's a place for you. Love has a bigger table. Love has a
on November 2nd, we've got baptism and we've got next level class. If you are interested in getting baptized that day, let us know. Comment below and let us know that you want to get baptized, and we can get you guys signed up. And we also have that next level class going on that day as well. If you want to learn more about the venues and the history of the venues and meet the staff, please join us that day for that as well if you're interested.
A couple of weeks ago, my wife Morgan and I had the opportunity to travel up to Rolla to see my niece perform in her first ever full-length play. It was Schoolhouse Rock Jr. It was the first stage production she's ever been in, where she had to memorize lines, audition for a part, and sing all the songs. And so we got to sing and hear all about nouns and conjunction junction. I told y'all I wasn't ever going to sing on stage again. But probably out of all of the songs that have ever been sung on Schoolhouse Rock, the one that if anyone knows any of them that they know is the I'm a Bill song. And just in case you've never seen it before, I'm going to show just about a minute of it really quickly so we can kind of get an idea of some of the things that people will have learned.
Woo, you sure gotta climb a lot of steps to get to this Capitol building here in Washington. Well, I wonder who that sad little scrap of paper is.
I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee, but I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will, but today I am still just a bill.
Gee, Bill, you certainly have a lot of patience and courage.
Well, I got this far. When I started, I wasn't even a bill. I was just an idea. Some folks back home decided they wanted a law passed, so they called their local congressman, and he said, "You're right, there ought to be a law." Then he sat down and wrote me out and introduced me to Congress, and I became a bill. And I'll remain a bill until they decide to make me a law.
There's definitely a part of me that wishes that in the same way that laws could just happen, right? We wish that people could just agree to figure out solutions to the problems facing society and then pass laws that actually, fix them. But maybe that's why this is a cartoon. But I also think there's something that was happening in the scene that was really important. You see, when the young boy sits down and talks to the bill, he says that the bill sure does have a lot of patience and courage. And I think that those are both things actually that we could learn a lot from. Because right now it seems like, what do we want? We want action. And when do we want it? Well, we want it yesterday. We've grown up with this idea that if we want something done well, that we have to do it ourselves. If we want to pass the group project at school, it's gonna come down to us doing all of the work and then the other people get the credit. If we want our business to go well, we just have to have the right grind set, or we just have to work harder to get up and go. And the truth is that we even seem to do this with our religions and our faith, right? We think that if we can just do more, or go to more classes, or do more seminary stuff, or just Jesus harder, or whatever, that maybe we'll figure it out. But there's a problem with this. Jürgen Apello noted this. He said, if you want something done, do it yourself, is a quote variously attributed to Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte, dramatist Charles Guillaume Etienne, and dictator Zorg in the movie The Fifth Element. I've said it myself more than once, as a cry of despair. But doing everything yourself is not scalable, as both Napoleon and Zorg have noticed to their dismay. So the next best alternative is to learn how to empower people. So today, as we look around and we see all of these big problems in the world around us, many of them we want to try to solve all at the same time, right? We want rightfully for the genocide in Palestine to end. We want there to be things like access to healthcare for everyone. We want there to be things like care for immigrants or better schools or better roads, less hate, better marriages or less gun violence. And we want all of that right now. And it can feel overwhelming, like it's too much for any one of us to do. And the reason it feels like it's too much for any one of us to do is because it is. And so today, as we are continuing our series called Get Outside, we're going to talk about what happens when we go outside and we realize that there is too much to do for any one of us to be able to accomplish it on our own. But in order to do that, we have to kind of take on a different posture than what often we have done. And that's kind of the big idea for today's teaching, and that's this: that sometimes the biggest obstacle to getting outside is ourselves. Let me say that again, because I think it's really important. I want us to kind of wrestle with this today for about the next 15 or 20 minutes, and that's this: that sometimes the biggest obstacle to getting outside is ourselves. And by the way, this is not to blame any of us. It's not something, where we're like bad or something is screwed up about us. Rather, it's just to note that sometimes we want to make such a big impact in the world around us, but in order to actually be able to do that, we have to stop standing in our own way. It's, by the way, one of the areas where most of the rest of the world's religions are absolutely just better at it than the religions that we've adopted here in the United States. For example, like Buddhism or Taoism have completely different philosophies on this. In Buddhism, they teach this thought that dwell realizing that in all phenomena, there is no self. And the Taoists teach something very similar when they say the sage does nothing, yet nothing is left undone. But one of the most complicated pieces, in my opinion, of living in 2025 in the United States is that we have a steep history that tells us it's all about what I can do. What difference can I make? It's all about what we can take into our own hands. But maybe there's actually a third way, right? Like maybe there's a third way that's somewhere between. It's all about me doing the things that I can do. And it's not just, let's not do anything and see what happens, that it gets done. In the Christian tradition, there is a lot of debate about a lot of the Bible. Who wrote what should be taken literally versus figuratively. But one of the things that there's very little debate about is the letter that we're going to be looking at today. It's called 1 Corinthians. It was a letter that Paul wrote to a group of people who were largely living in a very Roman-influenced culture. Basically, we're like stealing the mail from them, like reading an email, reading parts of it, and then trying to figure out what all was happening. Because what Paul would do is that he would go from city to city, find people who were trying to follow the path of love, the path of the divine, the path of Christ, the path of Jesus. And he would write to them about what might be the best way to do that. And he uses this metaphor that we're going to be looking at today of the body, like the human body, and kind of talking about how when the parts of people who are the church or the parts of people who are trying to follow this path come together, that it's kind of like a body. And here's what he writes. He writes, the human body has many parts, but the many parts make up one whole body. So it is with the body of Christ. If the foot says, I'm not a part of the body because I'm not a hand, that doesn't make it any less a part of the body. Our bodies have many parts, and God has put each part just where God wants it. How strange a body would be if it had only one part. Yes, there are many parts, but only one body. The eye can never say to the hand, I don't need you. And the head can't say to the feet, I don't need you. And part of the reason why I think that this letter, this email, basically that we're spying in on, can provide us so much clarity, so much of a third way, is because who it was written to and what they were experiencing at the time. When Paul was writing this letter, he was largely writing to people who understood the Roman culture at the time. They were deeply steeped in it. He was writing to people who would have had friends or uncles who drove their Roman carriages down the streets with big bumper stickers that said things like, "God bless Rome." Or they would have had Roman flags in their churches if they had churches. They were very steeped in the culture of Rome at the time. And what Paul was saying to them, while it might seem pretty mundane to us, was incredibly revolutionary to them. Obviously, we would say, well, yeah, of course, every part of our body matters. We have lungs and livers and things that we don't actually see. But for them, that's not what they had been taught. Historian Retta Haltman-Finger noted that Paul again contrasts Roman assumptions with his view of racial equality in Christ. The Roman elites had often used the image of the physical body for precisely the opposite meaning. Different parts of the body are not equal. The head is superior, hence the Roman elites are superior to everyone else. But Paul's opposing viewpoint is well taken. Hidden parts of the body, whether internal or the parts we cover up, are just as essential for life as our eyes, ears, and hands. So it's kind of in this space where we have all the pressure around us saying that it's all about us, right? We have all of this pressure saying it's all about number one. It's all about looking out for me. It's all about what I can do. And if it doesn't get done right, it's probably on me. And if it does get done right, it's on me as well. It's this notion that we're trying to balance those things with the fact that we want people in the 417 to flourish, right? We want the people, the world around us to get better. That we really find ourselves in this tension point. And it's because of that I think one of the first principles that we need to kind of see as getting ourselves out of our own way is this, that we often get stuck in main character energy. We often get stuck in main character energy. What I mean by this is that we often think of ourselves as the main part of the story being told around us. And right, this makes a ton of sense, right? We can't see the world through someone else's eyes. We only have our experience to engage in. When I was a kid, I used to sit in my bedroom and I had one of the old original Nintendo Entertainment Systems, right? The old 8-bit ones with the square controllers. And one of the very first games you would get with that is Super Mario Brothers. And you would always play as either Mario or Luigi, never the princess. So you had a certain viewpoint of the game. When we watch football, we see it through the lens of what's in the best interest of our team. If the officials make a call that goes against our team, it's obviously a bad call. If they make a call that favors our team, even if it was a bad call, it was obviously the right call. And unfortunately, we do this more and more with politics. The number of times politicians twist themselves into a knot trying to defend their leader when they say things that are objectively problematic just so that their team wins is so complicated. You all might know that I'm a huge fan of the show Survivor. And one of the realities is that every time someone gets voted off, they feel like it's a blindside. They think that they're going to win the game, that they're the main character in the television show. So they can't imagine a world where they get voted off. It's also the reason that many politicians can't imagine conceding because they can't fathom people voting for someone else. And it's the reason that I think we often miss out on our biggest areas of impact. We can't imagine, or it's really hard for us to imagine, that someone else would have come up with a better idea than we did. And that maybe we could make the biggest impact by just partnering with them. As my niece was preparing for her performance, I was talking to my sister about the benefit of theater for so many kids, namely that it lets them know that there are no insignificant performers, right? It teaches them patience. My niece didn't have a whole lot of lines and a whole lot of singing pieces, but you know what? She learned that when someone else is speaking, that you don't need to run in front of them. You don't need to literally upstage them or steal the spotlight. It's language that we use all the time that came out of the theater. But just like in Roman culture, how it pushed them to think that the elites were the ones who had all of the knowledge or should have all of the full control. Oftentimes, in our own world, we think that we are the ones who should have full control, that we should be the ones who make all of the decisions. And this isn't to blame us for this, by the way. The world around us sets us up for failure in this way. We often find ourselves in this loop where we tell the algorithm on our phone what we want to see. And then it tells us what it thinks that we want to see. And eventually it becomes almost impossible for us to tell the difference. This was highlighted recently as the United States has been trying to acquire TikTok from the company in China, ByteDance, that owns it. Kelly Cotter noted this about it. She said that TikTok's For You page algorithm is widely considered the most important part of the app. As one analyst put it, buying TikTok without the algorithm would be like buying a Ferrari without the engine. The algorithm's value lies in its uncanny capacity to anticipate users' content preferences. Many users claim it knows them better than they know themselves. A sentiment that has evolved into a curious mix of spiritual belief and conspiracy theorizing. And look, I get it. We see what we want to see. We want our entertainment to be curated to exactly what we want. There's a reason that I watch Survivor and you don't, because you don't want to. And while that might be fine for a short burst or when you just need to chill, I wonder if it doesn't also create a conflict when we are trying to live in the world around us, where we try to curate our experiences and everyone else tries to curate theirs as well. And sometimes, inevitably, those conflict. I think that might have been what Paul is critiquing when he says that all the parts of the body are equal. Namely, he says that while we see the world only through our own eyes, that's not the only way to see it, right? That many religious aspects, many parts of society have tried to latch on to other things that Paul says, but very rarely do we latch on to this aspect, do we? We tend to ignore the fact that we might be wrong. And as a side note, that's one of the things that I'm most thankful for here at the venues, is that you give us the opportunity to say, look, we may not know what's going on here. We'll try to walk this path with you, but sometimes we're just going to get it wrong. One of the people who I think writes best about this, Marcella Maria Alhaus Reed, wrote an article that probably has the best title of any article I've ever read. The title of this article is Marx in a Gay Bar: Indecent Theology as a Reflection on the Theology of Liberation and Sexuality. And you ever want to wonder what's in my algorithm? Now you know. By the way, if you ever want this article, just let me know, and I'll be happy to send it to you. But she notes this, which I thought was so interesting. She says, today's Christian people understand their faith in a dialogical way. Yet the Christian church is not dialogical. The Christian church has problems with something as elementary as the conceptualization of the category of gender. The employees of the bank where I have my checking account do not have this problem. The Christian church that calls itself an expert in humanity has not finished elementary school yet, and its ignorance moves me. Ideologies, for example, can defend an established order or replace one order with another. They are worldviews, collections of doctrines, theories, and principles that claim to interpret reality. Ideologies, according to Marx, replace the world of experience with the world of ideas. If human beings' experiences and their needs and happiness are opposed to the ideas, then those ideas are always chosen. In other words, when we think about the practice of faith, we think about it often in a conversation. We love connection groups where people can ask questions and have discussions. But when we think about not the practice of faith, but the faith itself, we often think that we have to have theologies or ideas that we are super holding tight to. And when those theologies disagree with people, we choose our theologies. One of my favorite shirts, one that I'm not wearing today, says, "Dear church, people are more important than your reputation." And unfortunately, for many of us, we have begun to believe that a particular theology or a particular ideology or a particular reputation is more important than people are. And that's not at all the path of love. I think it's possible that one of the reasons that we don't have these types of dialogues about faith is because we think of the play in our life as a monologue, not a dialogue. We think about the lines that we need to say, the theologies that we have to believe, and we have a hard time imagining how someone else could think about things in a different way. Practically, this happens all the time, right? If you're driving down the highway and someone cuts you off, how many times do we think something to ourselves like, don't they know that I'm in a hurry? They don't, obviously. In fact, odds are pretty likely they've never thought about you before, and they never will again. The reality is that they're probably in a hurry too. But we oftentimes have a hard time getting outside the image of ourselves to think about what other people see and experience. So how do we change that? Well, Paul does have some good news about it. It's not just bad news. Here's what he says. He says, so God has put the body together such that extra honor and care are given to those parts that have less dignity. This makes for harmony amongst the members so that all the members care for each other. In other words, it seems, and I could be wrong about this, but it seems like what Paul is saying here is that the way to counter the idea that there is inequality or the way to counter oppression is to take extra care of those who are currently given less dignity. And that's kind of our last big principle for today that I want us to latch on to. And it's this: to get out of our own way, prioritize those who have the least. To get out of our own way, prioritize those who have the least. If we truly want to make a difference, it seems like Paul and others are saying that we need to put specific insistence on those who have the least dignified, the least wealthy, the least well-connected, the ones least able to return the favor. And I'll be honest with you, it seems weird because we oftentimes think like we want equality. We want to give everyone the same thing. It's the same argument, though, that gets made when people say like all lives matter. Right, everyone does matter, but when someone is hurting, we need to focus in those specific areas. I believe that the path of love isn't that we shouldn't have equality, but rather that just the notion that all lives matter or all people are exactly the same doesn't go far enough. It doesn't go far enough down the path. Paul seems to say here that the parts of the body that are often the least well taken care of should be given special treatment. Unless you think that it's just Paul who thinks this, by the way. Jesus says almost the exact same thing in Luke chapter 4. When he's first announcing what he's going to do on this earth, here's what he says. He says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim the captives will be released, that the blind will see, that the oppressed will be set free, and that the time of the Lord's favor will come. It doesn't say anything here about making sure that the top 1% continue to get tax cuts or that the rich get richer. He doesn't say anything about making sure that those who have always had privilege continue to have their privilege. In fact, it seems like he doesn't care about it. Instead, what both Paul and Jesus seem to describe as the path of following love is one that focuses and prioritizes others. You know, sometimes this is super easy for me to fathom. When we were up seeing my niece in her performance, there was not a single time that my brother-in-law jumped out of the audience to stand on stage. There was not one time that he decided to say my niece's lines or to sing out loud. He did not need to be the superstar of the show. Is it possible that he would have known the lines better than my niece? Maybe. But instead what happened is he was just super happy to let my niece shine. Let her have that experience and find that success. I have a friend who is a pastor of a church in Colorado that is a lot like the venues. And a couple of weeks ago, he suggested an action that I think is pretty similar. He specifically asked the men in his congregation to agree to go work in the nursery one Sunday a month. He said, you know what, look, church has often been built around what is in the best interest of men. Songs are often chosen because they are in a lower register, because for cis straight men, that is often the voice that is most accompanying that, or that's at least the idea there, right? The people on stage were almost always men. The people who taught were almost always men. And women were asked to go to church and work in the nursery so that men could have a break. So he said, as an act of rebellion against the system that says men can't serve in nurseries and that women should never get to hear the teaching, that men needed to take the action there and sign up. I'll be honest, I haven't asked him how it went yet. But I do think there's a practical piece that comes from saying that we should serve those in the most radical ways possible. In our programming here every Sunday morning, we have somewhere between 60 and 100 people who are not in the auditorium, who instead are back in our kids' venue programming. They're doing that. They miss what is being said in here because they believe it is important to make sure that the next generation of people do not grow up with the same style of church trauma that many of us have experienced. Amy Crawford and her team do a great job of making sure that volunteers are equipped, making sure that all the volunteers have to do is show up and love people. And honestly, if you would like to do that, we background check all of our volunteers, and Amy would love to talk to you about it. You can email her at amy@thevenues.org. And the thing is that when we make those types of moves, those radical moves to say that we are going to prioritize what other people need, it actually not only helps other people, but it also brings us together. During the early 2000s, there was a huge crisis moving through Botswana of HIV/AIDS. And these who were often overlooked weren't getting the types of treatment that they needed. So there swelled up this movement amongst churches in Botswana to identify with and as the people who were most often oppressed. Adrian Van Klinken wrote this about it. He said, the notion of solidarity between members of the body of Christ has been deployed by several African theologians to make an ethical plea for solidarity in the face of the HIV epidemic. The church, in other words, should not shy away from saying, we have AIDS. The notion of the body of Christ has been deployed in these theologies exactly because it allows for the rethinking of difference as something that not necessarily separates us, but rather can create a commonality and enable solidarity. You see, when we push past our differences, when we focus on those who are often the least able to repay us, it creates a unique amount of solidarity. And there are a lot of areas that we need solidarity right now. Healthcare, gun violence, climate change, etc. But one of the ways that these big problems can be solved is if we start realizing that it doesn't have to directly affect us for it to matter. My shirt this morning says, it shouldn't have to happen to you for it to matter to you. Put really personally and very bluntly, my wife Morgan and I, we don't have kids. It wasn't in the cards. But we think that what happens down in kids' venue is the most important thing that we do every Sunday, full stop. Does it benefit me directly? Nope. Oftentimes it means that Morgan doesn't get to be in the auditorium because she's volunteering down in kids' venue. So I have to fill her in on what happened in the auditorium on our way home. But in the same way that I will always vote for increases in school funding because it benefits our society to have an educated population, even if I don't get any direct benefit out of it, I think our society is better when we have a next generation of people who don't experience the church hurt and the church trauma that many of us have faced. In a very similar vein, I am not trans and I am not an immigrant. I'm a person who has healthcare coverage and who owns rather than rents my home. But when laws are passed that make my trans friends feel unsafe to live in Springfield, and so they have to move, that really bothers me. When immigrants get rounded up by people in masks without IDs, that really bothers me. When people go bankrupt because they don't have health care, or when they have to choose between paying rent and buying groceries, it bothers me. It's something that I need to care about. It doesn't have to happen to me for it to matter to me. I think one person who really exemplified this unfortunately passed away recently. Jane Goodall spent her life advocating for people who would never be able to advocate for themselves. Not people, but non-human animals in the animal kingdom. She recently passed away, and I want you to hear what she thought was really important. She said this: "Only if we understand can we care. Only if we care, we will help. And only if we help, we shall be saved." If we want to make a difference, one that is felt outside of ourselves and for generations to come, maybe that's the step toward love, right? Maybe it's not that we don't love ourselves, it's just that we think about other people too. We start thinking about the position that they see the world, and we think about them like we think about ourselves. We see others, even those without the same experiences or the same background, as people who are worthy of being cared for just because they are. Yeah, it probably requires us to act like that Bill, with patience and courage. And sometimes it's going to require us to act like it's our first ever play where we don't have a ton of lines. But I think that's what it looks like when we all start to get outside of our own way and let others thrive too. You know, one of the ways that we try to do that here at the venues is through trying to finish services with a time of questions and answers. And so if you're watching this service right now, one thing that we would love you to do is in the comments below, drop a question. And I would love to respond to you and talk about that, because it's not about centering my stories. It's about centering yours. It's not just about the questions that I wonder about. It's about the questions that you're thinking about. And maybe there's something where we can get together and really see the world through each other's lives, each other's eyes. And maybe the best way to do that would be to go to thevenues.org/coffee. Let's find a time where we can talk, where I can see the world as you see it, and we can ask those questions and have those discussions. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for joining us. If you liked what you saw and want to make sure that you don't miss anything that we do, go ahead and add us to your favorite and Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and we'll make sure that we're at the top of the algorithm.